Kick back, have a sit, turn it up, get your fix. Time to upgrade, augment, but stay real, this the naked patient. Come by, the doc is in, you'll understand why it's good to be Nick. Like a tattoo, these words stick. All net, never throwing up bricks. Let's grow together through the weather, we can make a dent. Authentic people sharing stories, hope that it clicks. No need to dress it up, this is real as it gets. Let's strip it down, this the naked patient, yeah.
Welcome to the Naked Patient Podcast. This is a special edition because it's our very first repeat guest. Not like a two-parter. I know Corey Moore was on several episodes. Jeremy Macy was a two-parter. Those were not repeat guests, though. So this is a completely separate episode with a repeat special guest, Miss Haleigh DeBruyn.
Hello.
Welcome.
This is really weirdly formal. We're like sitting away from each other.
It is awkwardly formal. Well, so Haleigh was, for full disclosure, Haleigh was the first podcast I recorded, not the first guest that I released, but you were the first one I actually recorded.
Yeah. And
we were sort of dating or just dipping our toes into dating each other. And now we're just like full-blown committed in it, dating each other.
A full-blown committed relationship.
Yeah. Maybe we'll get into that.
Yeah, maybe a little bit.
We'll see. I don't know if people want to hear that or not.
Well, I know. It's like, is that what the people want to know?
No, the people don't want to hear the dirty details of our relationship. But it grew from there. It was and it's been a ride. But what I have realized was that that very first recording, I had an idea of what this podcast was going to be. It was going to be plastic surgery, take the shame out of it, tell me if it changed your life or not. And that's all. And your episode was great. Like it's a good episode, but that's all it was.
Yeah, it was very much like by the book of what you had talked about from the get-go of what you wanted to. And I think what really shifted your perception of where this should go, where your podcast was going, was, you had Eric Ney come on and tell his story. And then you actually recorded one with Mark and Michelle right afterwards. And it was kind of the same thing as mine was. And you're like, guys, we need to focus more on talking about our friendship. And I think that was like the catalyst of this is what this needs to be. This needs to be stories about people, relationships, growth, experiences.
Yeah.
And not just plastic surgery. What did you have done and how has it changed your life? Well, my boobs are bigger.
Exactly. It's very plastic surgery adjacent.
Yeah.
Some people, I've had people come on now who've never been patients of mine. I've had people come on who've never had plastic surgery. And so you coming back was much less about, oh, we're dating now, let's do another episode.
Yeah. When I heard Eric Ney's, when I heard Eric's, I was like, oh, God, we missed I don't want to say a big opportunity, but kind of, because I felt like from that point on, I had so much more of a story to tell that still could be tied into plastic surgery and the empowerment piece of it. And we didn't, we kept it, I don't want to say light and fluffy, but we didn't delve into anything.
No, not at all. I think one of the things I'm most proud about with this podcast is you can go pick out an episode and say, I want to know this person. I want to know more about this person.
Yeah.
Except yours.
Yeah, exactly.
Yours
which is so funny.
Yours is and I'll bet people have probably done that because oh, Nick's dating this girl. Oh my gosh, she was on his podcast. Well, I want to know more about her. And then they listen to that episode and they're like, oh, she had her breasts augmented and her septoplasty done.
Woo!
And it helped her sing better. And so, and I want people to know you. because I know and love you.
Love you.
And so I can't remember when we brought this up, maybe a couple of weeks ago. And I was like, honey, you got to come back on. You've got to share your story, and just because I want people to know you.
Yeah. And we talked about, my stomach's been in knots, especially driving up here, because I told you this maybe 2 or 3 days ago, but this will be the first time, like even to you, I haven't told, like verbally spoken this story out loud in its entirety ever before.
No.
I've written it out. And even still, I think there's things that were omitted, and just for the sake of brevity.
Yeah.
So.
And I want you to share whatever you're most comfortable with, but I am so impressed by the woman that you are. And this podcast is about, I realized this last week with Jenna, with Jenna's episode. Mm-hmm. This podcast is about not just people who've been through trauma, but people who have made that not their story.
Yeah.
They've overcome it, and they've helped see their trauma as something that happened for them and not to them. Mm-hmm. And you are one of my greatest examples of that in life.
Yep.
And so walk me through, and this is not like, okay, now tell me your traumas.
Yeah. Now spill it.
But I do want to hear a little bit about your journey to becoming like who you are.
Yeah. I also want to point out that we decided to do this after I've gotten off of antidepressants. So this is going to be an emotional roller coaster. We couldn't have done this like 3 months ago, and I would have been just nice and cool, calm and collected. But where's the fun in that?
Exactly. I'm doing this the right way.
Yeah. I think, so the story you're referring to, it's something I've posted before. And when I was in high school, it was the end of my senior year. I was in a relationship that was abusive and was mentally, physically, sexually abusive. And I think it's
right from the start.
Not necessarily right from the beginning. There were definitely signs and warning signs, red flags that came up, but there were already some things that had happened in my life to get me to a point where I was not recognizing them. When I was 14, my best friend and his dad passed away from carbon monoxide poisoning. And that kind of put me on a trajectory, or not necessarily a trajectory, but a path of, searching for someone, because at the time, and even, I will say, even up until the beginning of last year, I truly thought that when Aaron died, my person had died. And so I was, searching for someone to fill that hole. Even at 14, I mean, when it's kind of crazy to think, but, his parents had been junior high school sweethearts. My parents were high school sweethearts. So you just kind of have this mentality, and I think in Utah also, that you're going to find your person super young, you're going to get married super young, and everything's just going to fall in place. Yeah. And the world had been ripped out from underneath me at that point. Fast forward a couple of years, end of high school, I had dated someone throughout my senior year who was a year older than I was. He he was graduated. His family life was difficult. He was a foster child and was kind of back and forth, one foot in, 1 foot out of the church. His upbringing, when he was born and when he was younger, his mom was a drug addict, and he and his older brother had raised the two younger brothers until they were taken away from their mom. And he was the first person who I had had sex with, but it was this constant, like, have sex, repent, have sex, repent. And so I was always caught in this weird limbo.
He was
with
repenting,
him.
not you.
He was repenting. I was not.
You were not a member of the church.
No, I was not a member. And, I truly thought that I loved him. My family, welcomed him kind of with open arms, even though things were just, there was just something very immature about him. Mm-hmm. And that's, when you're 17, 18, what more can you expect? He was immature. He wasn't, ready for the kind of commitment that he was telling me that we were going to have. And then towards the end of our relationship, when I was about to graduate, he was going to parties with his older brother, his older biological brother. And they were drinking, they were partying, and he'd come back, oh, this girl showed me her tits and they were great. Why don't you get your tits done? Kind of a thing. That's what you should do. And it just, his focus at that time was to party and have fun. And I kind of got just thrown by the wayside by someone who I thought, we had a relationship with. Yeah. So in comes this other person. I don't want to say his name. He was on the soccer team. In school, he was a year younger than I was, but because he was from out of the country, he told everyone he was from Spain.
Okay.
And that he had moved here with his mom and his sister.
You were also a big soccer player.
Mm-hmm. I played soccer in high school. So, my dad coached on the high school boys team and the girls team. So I was managing the boys team. And so we got to start hanging out and flirting. And he was very charismatic, very kind of cheeky. Mm-hmm. And he was also very Latin, very passionate, very now I see it as controlling. But at the time I thought, after coming out of this relationship with someone who I thought I was in love with, who, couldn't care one way or the other if we ended up together after everything. He wanted to be around me all the time. I remember one point where there was a CD that my ex-boyfriend had burned, a mixtape back in the day, and he'd seen it, and he's like, "Oh, what is this?" And he's like, "Oh, fuck this!" And he rolls down my car window and throws out the window. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to have anything from him in the car because he didn't love you. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh my gosh, he's just all about me. And things progressed very rapidly. The first time that we had sex was not, I wouldn't say was 100% consenting on my part, even from that point. We were on my parents' couch, and we were kind of fooling around, and he kind of forced himself inside of me. Mm-hmm. And it was at the time I was like very taken aback, but also okay, well, we were fooling around. It wasn't it's not that big of a deal. It was headed that way, maybe. And the relationship just kind of rapidly progressed from there. And I graduated high school. I had a job. I graduated high school. I was first attendant for Miss Riverton that year. I had done the Miss Riverton pageant in between breaking up with my ex and dating
new guy.
And that caused a lot of strife with him too, because I was constantly having to go and do floats and parades and all these things. And so
as a local celebrity,
as you do when you're Miss Riverton's first attendant. And my job for the summer, I worked at Murray Pool, and I just was the cashier at the pool. And he would come.
Wendy Peppercorn.
He would come every day to the pool. And at first I thought it was because he wanted to come and see me, but realized it was that he was checking up that I was there.
Okay.
He was coming to make sure that no one else was talking to me there, that he was staking his claim. And it got to a point where he's like, you're not going to wear shorts. You're not going to wear, short sleeve shirts, tank tops while you're there, like covered up. And looking back, I don't understand how I was just like, okay, this is fine. No problems here. Like, it was very much textbook control from the get-go. Yeah. But I was so enraptured.
It's like the frog in the water.
Yeah, it's the boil.
Yeah.
But I was so enraptured by the idea of someone who wanted me that much, because he was from the get-go was talking about how he wanted to be with me forever, and I was perfect, and I was this, and I was that. And I wanted to hear those things so badly from someone. Regardless of what the little voice in the back of my head was telling me.
Yeah.
And my parents saw it. My parents saw what was going on. They, from the get-go, they had a couple of family friends come and talk to me very early on, asking me, how I was doing, and just making sure that I was making good choices for myself, and that, that they were just concerned about what they saw going on. Because I was also supposed to be going down to play soccer at SUU that fall. And it was kind of apparent to everyone that was not on this guy's agenda. It was keeping me around. So we would hang out pretty much every day, and it just became very, very volatile.
Did you guys ever talk about that soccer coming up? Like, did he try to talk you out of going to play? Or?
We had a meeting. My dad and I had a meeting with the coach at SUU at the time. And he came over to the house. My dad had put a DVD together of all my highlight reel, like a highlight reel of everything. I had signed.
Gosh, can I get hands on this DVD?
Yes, it's horrible.
Okay.
But yes, I'm sure it's somewhere. But there's,
Haleigh was nicknamed the bulldozer.
Yeah, in high school.
High school.
In high school, it was the bulldozer.
High school soccer career.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I lost my train of thought.
So Dad put a DVD.
Yeah, that's right. We put down to the DVD, and he's like, "Well, you're not going, right?" He's like, "Why are you telling your dad that you're going to do this? Because you're not going. You're not doing this." And I was so torn between pleasing my parents and doing something that that really deep down I wanted to do. And maintaining this relationship. And what really it came down to was there had been so many times from very early on that it wasn't just, oh, he's so passionate about me. It was like, oh, if you ever leave me, I'm going to kill myself. If anything ever happens, I'll hurt myself. And there were so many times where we'd have a small disagreement or a small argument, and I wouldn't be able to get a hold of him because he was, feigning or making it seem like he was so distraught that he was about to inflict harm on himself. Mm-hmm. And it's really, and not just on himself either. He would threaten harm on himself. He would threaten to do something to my family. There was all kinds of really strange, just threatening behavior that hadn't yet progressed into physical harm towards me yet. But the mental load of having someone who was going to potentially harm themselves, and that would be on my conscience, was kind of enough at the time to keep me, and that was what kept me in the relationship from till the very end, was that I was so afraid that he was going to do something to himself, and then that would have been on me. Yeah. As things kind of progressed through the summer, it became physically and emotionally abusive. He was always so concerned and so worked up about what my ex and I had done sexually. And it was a huge bane of contention when he would always ask, well, did you give him a blowjob? Did you do, all these things? And then all of a sudden it was like he would force me to one-up it. And I just did. I was so broken in my mind that I would have done anything. Yeah. And it's so hard for me to look back on myself in that time because I don't know who that person was. I really and truly don't. And I've had shame over that for so long because so many people, are in abusive relationships, but they have families, they have kids, they have things that make them stay. And it was 17, 18, 19. There was nothing that was forcing me to stay besides my own fear of what he would do.
Well, that, and you had created this idea in your head that you had lost your person and that somebody had to fill that role.
Yeah.
And God forbid you lose another person.
Mm-hmm. And God forbid someone die and it be my fault.
Yeah.
The kind of the point where I had really gotten scared of what was going on, like things would get physical between the two of us when we would argue. And there were a couple times where he'd held me up against the wall and tried to choke me, not enough to leave a mark or anything. And then I was getting to a point where I was starting to be kind of physically abusive back in order to kind of protect myself. And then he would hold that as, well, you're just as bad as me. But there was a point where he had my cell phone, and he was going through it and was asking me who every single person in my phone contacts was. And the next day I had just had this feeling. And so I wrote in a note and put it in my glove box. I wrote down a couple contacts in my phone. Mm-hmm. And wrote them down, and he told me, well, there's no reason that you should be talking to anyone else but me.
Do you remember the people who you were writing down to save, or why? Or
one of them was a gal. She was the second attendant for Miss Riverton. It was her and the girl who was Miss Riverton. My ex-husband's number, because I had known him at the time.
Oh, okay.
We knew each other in high school.
Yeah.
I had written down his phone number because we had been good friends before all of this, before I became really isolated from everyone. Just a couple other friends who had been, who I had known from school and from high school. And he sat there and told me I had to delete every single contact from my phone that wasn't basically him or my family's. That was like a big oh shit moment.
Yeah.
That was a huge oh shit moment. And we had gone to a movie at the old Movies 9 in Sandy.
I think it still exists.
I think it does. I think, is it like it's $1?
Yeah.
Just $1 movies now. We'd gone to a movie, and he got in my car. And I don't know why he went into my glove box. He went to my glove box and found the list of phone numbers. And that was like, to that point, that was the most volatile things have gotten. And I was like, oh shit, this is bad. This is really not good.
Yeah.
We had gone back to the apartment that his mom and his sister were living in. And him and his mom were sharing a room. His mattress was on the floor, and she was had the main bed. And he kind of pulled me into the room and was just berating me, asking me why I felt like I needed to see anyone else. There shouldn't be any reason that I need to be talking to anyone else. Things started to turn physical again. He kind of curled up into himself, started to act like he was crying, and I went to go comfort him, and he turned around and just punched me, or just kicked me in the stomach, and I just flew across the room into the dresser. And that was like, I need to be done. I need to be done with this. So I grabbed my stuff. I left. The next day, I decided I was gonna end it. I was gonna break up with him. I don't know what possessed me to think that I had to do it in person. There are just some situations where you don't need to be doing things in person. And after, that's one of them. A breakup text is perfectly acceptable in that situation. And I remember vividly what I was wearing. I had gone to New York for like a graduation trip. I had bought these bell-bottom pants they were hand painted, and a yellow top, and this fake Louis Vuitton bag that I had gotten in New York. And I went over there and told him, I'm done. I don't want to be with you anymore. I don't want to hear from you. I don't want to see you. There was definitely a point where I don't remember. I mean, I don't remember, honestly, a lot of what happened. I've blocked so much of it out. And I think that's part of why it's so hard for me to talk about.
Yeah.
And it comes across very disjointed because I don't have a firm grasp on everything that happened that summer. But, like I said before, there were a lot of things in that relationship that sexually that started without a whole lot of consent. And this was the first time that he actually physically raped me, though. And I remember I turned around to leave, and he grabbed my purse and pulled it, and the strap broke. And so I went to go grab it because my car keys were in there, and he just wrestled me down to the bed. Most of my clothes were still on after everything was said and done. And it was quick, but it was very, very violent. I just remember, there comes a point, at least for me, where I just stopped struggling.
Yeah.
You just laid there. And I got up after, and his mom and sister had been sitting out in the front room when I had walked in, and they were still out there. I mean, it was not a quiet fight by any means. I was not docile about it until I knew that if I kept struggling, something worse might happen.
They heard everything.
Yeah, they heard everything. But I knew also from what he had said that his dad, who was still in Spain, was very, very abusive and very volatile, and he was very afraid of him. So I could only imagine that his mom and sister were as afraid or more so of him. And they just, I don't blame them. I know it's not right, but that they stood there, but I don't blame them for not intervening. So I left, went back home, and he had told me, I won't live without you. You belong to me. And instead of telling someone, and instead of leaving, instead of just not going back, he knew where my family lived. He knew where my grandparents lived. He knew every bit about me. I went to Salt Lake County Courthouse the next day, and we got married.
The day after he raped you.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Oh. His sister and he had two sisters. It was his other sister who was married, who did not live with them, witnessed it, were witnesses to the ceremony. And I remember going in, and there's this older couple, and they were just so excited and so happy, and they smiled at us thinking that this was like this great, fantastic thing. And I had this giant black hickey on my neck from the night before, and it was more of a bite mark than a hickey. It was like a claim And we got married, and I didn't tell a single person. No one knew. I still lived with my parents. I still went on like everything.
Who suggested did he suggest we're getting married?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
As part of the you belong to me deal.
Mm-hmm. You belong, it was kind of, and if you don't do this, I knew some of the people who he was associated with, and knowing who, there was just something I didn't know at the time, but he was involved in some gang related stuff. I had suspected it. And after he was arrested, it came out that, he had all these aliases under these gang task force things. So, and I think that was a big part of it too, of where my fear was driven from, is that I had an inkling that something just wasn't right. And the threat of violence was more than just him saying it. That there was something about him, or something that he was caught up in, that was more than just a threat.
Yeah. At
any point, at any time.
All right. So you guys get married. You've told nobody.
Mm-hmm. And we just kind of keep it to ourselves. But now he's got this fucking bargaining chip to hold over me, on top of everything else. And he's at the point, the summer's kind of coming to a close. We're at the point where I'm about to go down to SUU.
Yeah.
I have missed or, fucked up several things for Miss Riverton that I was supposed to be doing, that I didn't fulfill or didn't follow through on obligations for. Like, I was always there for things, but like for the 24th of July, you're supposed to be at this float. They do like an exhibition for all the floats, and all of the royalty are supposed to be there. I was so out of my mind of what was going on. I don't even remember didn't remember we were supposed to be there. Could have sworn no one told me. No one told me a damn thing, but everyone else got the memo.
Yeah.
But I was so focused on just getting through each day that I showed up for that parade, but I kind of had screwed up. They do awards and things like that, and I had totally screwed that up for them. And it wasn't just for the city; it was for these other girls too. I had no freaking idea, no clue. So there were a lot of things that were starting to fall through the cracks. I was supposed to be getting ready to go play soccer. I hadn't done a damn bit of work that summer. I had kind of been brought onto the team as a late recruit anyway, and I knew I was going to go down there and just die.
Yeah.
And he is constantly telling me, if you go down there, you need to come right back. You're going to go down there, tell them you can't play, and you need to come back. So I have all my stuff for playing down there. I go down, we're staying in the dorms.
Mm-hmm. You're just putting on faces for your parents at this point?
Oh,
yeah, I'm going off to soccer. Did they ask, what about this guy? Like,
they probably did. I mean, like I said, they knew something was off.
Yeah.
They knew it, because I would, he would have an outburst where he said he was going to hurt himself, and I would just drop everything and just be gone.
Yeah.
And what really worried them too is they're like, it is the middle of summer, girl, and you are wearing long pants and like quarter sleeve shirts. Get in some damn shorts. I don't know. I'm good. It's fine.
You weren't allowed to.
No, wasn't allowed to. And yeah, they the funny thing of it is I've never talked to him about it since.
Your parents?
They got me over the hump and I just locked it away. And I've never asked them about how they felt or how it impacted them to see me like that, even though they knew something wasn't right. And they didn't even know the full story of it until I posted it, on Instagram earlier, or, middle of last year. Yeah. My mom and my uncle both talked to me for the first time and said, "Oh my God, I had no idea." So anyway, I go down to SUU and we're in the older dorms, and I am constantly in contact with him. There is not a moment other than when I am in practice that I am not supposed to be completely, constantly letting him know my goings on.
Yeah.
And the soccer coach, he talked to my dad a few years later, and my dad told him what had happened, because I just picked up my stuff and left. I think it was day 4 or day 5. But he noticed I would come to practice and I was on my phone walking into practice until the whistle blew to start, to the point where as soon as practice was over, back on that phone again. And I remember there was a point where, practice was starting. I was kind of, trying to put my stuff on, and Edgar was, he was saying, "Don't hang up this phone. Do not hang up this phone. If you hang up this phone and if you are not back by the end of today, I am coming down there. I am coming down there with Fish, his friend, and you will never see your family again. I'm taking you to Spain. You'll never see your family. My dad's coming into town. I'll have him get you a ticket, and we're gone." So I hung up on him. Went and did practice, was completely, not paying attention, just completely not in the right headspace the whole entire practice. Went to the coach after practice, and I said, "You know what? My knee is really bad. It's just really hurting me." And I had torn my ACL when I was a sophomore, and then had surgery again before my senior year of playing. I said, I really think I need to go get it x-rayed or go get it looked at. And he's like, "Okay, sounds good." I packed up all of my stuff and drove home through the night. Got home about 2:00 in the morning from Cedar City. And the coach called me the next morning. He's like, "I thought you were just going to the doctor. Where the hell are you? Like, your room is cleared out." Well, my doctor said I can't play anymore. "Oh, you went and got your knee looked at that fast? Yeah, I can't play." So I quit the team with no warning to my dad, and he was so disappointed. He was so disappointed in me. And I still had plans to go back to SUU for college. Like, what the hell was I going to do? Like, I had to face those people again. And the 2 or 3 days after I had come back home, my family said, okay, we're going to have a family game night. But here's the kicker. Your phone is not yours. You were not touching that thing the entire time. I lost my shit because I knew if I was not in constant contact, something was going to happen. And he kept holding over, if you don't, when I was down for soccer, if I wasn't responding fast enough, well, I'm going to go tell your family that we're married and then I'm taking you away because I have the legal right to do so. Yeah. If you don't, really everything, if you don't do this, I'm going to tell them. And of course there was still the physical abuse that was happening. There was still the sexual abuse, like that didn't ever stop in between all of this stuff. It wasn't just him threatening me with these things. So my family, we start having this game night and I am just an anxious wreck. I am sick to my stomach of what's going to happen. I
didn't realize he was still abusing you throughout this.
Oh yeah. Yeah. It was constant. Any little thing that would set him off. And again, I was this kind of, I'd fight back a little bit to the point where I was leaving marks on him and then I was the abuser. You know what I mean? So, he kept saying, I'm going to go leave a copy of the marriage license on your dad's car. And when he comes out in the morning, he's going to know what's happened. And, then I'm going to take you away. And finally my mom goes, Haleigh, goes, what is wrong with you? What is so horrible that you are acting like you are just, like you're not present at all? Like, what is going on? You are so worried about having your phone. What's the big deal? What's the problem? And, I told him everything that had happened. I told them that, that we had gotten married. And well, we were in the kitchen and my brother just starts crying and he runs off to his room. My mom starts crying and like almost banging her head against the cabinet door. My dad gets on the phone and calls him up, threatens to kill him. And my dad, he's like, that not a feather ruffled on that man.
The most chill guy ever.
Uh-huh. Not a feather ruffled on that man. And, threatened to kill him, threatened if I ever see you again. And I felt this weight lifted that I had finally told someone what had happened and what was going on. And the next morning, I'm standing in my closet. My dad and I have been talking the whole night. He'd called some friends. We had found a lawyer. We were getting this thing annulled. And it was a fog. A fog had been left. And I was standing in my closet and I turned and I looked at him and I don't even know what's happened the last 3 months. I have no idea how I got to this point, is what I told him. I said, I don't know how I got to this point. So we were able to get the marriage annulled under marriage under duress. He was still at Riverton High School. Mm-hmm. And because now when we finally got all of this done and taken care of, we're into, I'm at college. He's a senior, and my soccer coach had to serve him papers in front of everyone in the class because they couldn't get a hold of him to serve papers. Mm-hmm. So my soccer coach had to be the one to serve him. So, everyone knew I would come back to go to games, and I had people asking me all these, really invasive questions about, what went on? Why, did you actually marry him? Did you had sex with him? I'm like, yeah. And it was a very judgmental, stigmatic way that they were asking. It wasn't like, I don't know. It was just a very strange way that they were asking in regards to, I don't know. I don't want to put it on religious stuff, but
the culture is difficult.
Yeah. But so I went down to SUU. I went back down. I was in the dorms. My family did not allow me my cell phone or my laptop at that point. And I had to call them just on a prepaid phone card from the dorm phone. Mm-hmm. So that he couldn't track me down and I couldn't reach back out to him. Because even though this is a terrible, horrible, shitty relationship, there is just something that pulls you back into that toxicity.
Yeah.
And, there's just anyone who's been in a relationship like that can attest to that. It's horrible. It's terrible. You are crazy for doing it and you still do it.
Yeah.
So I am down at SUU. Yeah. I'm down at SUU and I get a knock on the door at the dorm, and one of my roommates comes in and goes, "Hey, there's some guy who's claiming he's your husband," at the door. And he had gone to the housing department with our marriage certificate and, basically made them give him my information of where I was staying and where I was living.
Yeah. Were you trying to get back on the soccer team at this point?
No.
That was just gone.
No, there was no way. I was tail between my legs, was not even going to
Got it.
broach that subject. And he's there. He's standing outside of my dorm room with an empty bottle of pills, saying that he has taken them all and he is trying to kill himself and he needs my help. And I'm panicking. Yeah. They just panicking. I said, "Well, have you called 911? Yeah, will you just come out with me while I wait for him?" Sure. Yeah, no problem. Again, it's just the things like things I was doing, looking back, what the fuck was I thinking? But you're not.
No.
You're not thinking at all. It is survival and instinctual. So I went outside, walked out the dorm rooms, and as soon as we get outside, he has his car parked outside. Passenger seat door is wide open, and he starts forcing me into his car. Gets me in the car and says, "If you fucking move, I will hurt you." And I had already known, what the physical threat of violence was, but I don't know why I didn't still at that point jump out of the car and try to leave, but I froze. Just that fight or flight. I just froze. And if you've ever been down to Cedar City and down to SUU, the path from the college to the freeway is super short. It's like 2 lights. And he gets in the car, we leave, and we get on the freeway and he just tells me, you're never going to see your family again. You're never going to see anyone again. I'm taking you somewhere that you won't have any contact with them. This won't happen. Like, don't think you're getting away from me ever. And something in my brain at that moment, as we were driving on the freeway, just snapped. And I thought to myself, instead of living like this for the rest of my life, I would rather be dead.
Did you think you were going to survive, or did you think he was going to kill you?
No, I thought I'd survive. I just thought that it would be, I don't know how I thought, I would end up out of the country.
Yeah.
With no consent, but I was just so weak-willed at the time.
I would have assumed he was taking you to kill you and then maybe himself. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, that thought, I don't know if that thought had ever crossed my mind, because I think I knew deep down that he was so cowardly that he would never do that to himself. But I don't know, I had the thought, like, there's no way I'm not going to live like this. And we're driving down the freeway going, 75 as we're pulling on to the freeway. And I just grabbed the steering wheel and he looks at me and goes, don't do it. And I just pulled on the steering wheel and we spun out against 3 lanes of traffic, ended up on the side of the road with a blown out tire, facing the right direction somehow. And he was, flipping out that I had just done this. And there was a truck that we had kind of cut off, and he was pulling up behind us and was honking his horn at us, like, to stop. And with this flat tire, just pulled off the side of the road and it just floors it off the freeway. Into kind of a residential rural area. There were a lot of houses that were built. It was a little bit new build kind of area. And proceeds to get on top of me from the passenger side, like from the driver's side into the passenger side, to rape me again. And I got out of the car after, and
he did rape you again.
And I don't know, I got out of the car. I knew about where I was and just walked back to the dorm. And I don't know how he ended up back in Salt Lake. Don't know what happened from there. But I got back to the dorm after, I ran back, and October, the annulment was finalized. He never responded to the papers. So the judge just granted the annulment. And then in January, I was at home with my parents, and it was on the weekend. I had driven back down from SUU. The rest of that semester, I just bombed.
Was he trying to contact you at all?
He wasn't. His he was trying to contact my family, which is really weird. He was trying to contact my dad. And there was one point where he contacted my dad and said, you know, my dad's in town. I'm afraid of him. He's here at this, you know, parking lot, and I'm afraid he's going to hurt me. Will you come down? My dad's like, what the hell? So he calls a friend of his who was in the police department for West Jordan, was where the parking lot was, and, you know, asked him if they could just send a patrol car down there, because he's like, I'm not going down there.
Yeah. And
the patrol car goes down there, and there's not a soul. There's no one there. So I don't know what that was about, but he was constantly trying to contact my family and be in contact with them. His mom and his mom's boyfriend came over to my parents' house at one point while I was there, and I don't know, we're trying to plead his case to my parents I don't know. But in January, we were home. I was home with my parents, and we were watching the news. And we always had this joke about when someone would come up that had been arrested, we'd be like, "Oh, it's going to be him. Oh, it's going to be him." So we had that, you know, that running joke. And the next day, my family friend, Dave, who you met, calls my dad and says, "Hey, can we go for a drive real fast and go chat?" So Dad goes and talks with Dave and comes back and talks with my mom for a minute. My mom brings me in and says, "Haleigh, can you come in the front room for a minute?" So I walk in the front room and I said, "Shh." She goes, "You're gonna maybe want to sit down." And I go, "Okay, cool." And so I sit, and she goes, "I need to tell you something." And she goes, "Been arrested for murder. He shot someone in the back, and it was gang related. And so he's been arrested." And it was another moment of absolute relief.
Yeah.
That he was gone. But also, holy shit, that could have easily been me. The threat of violence that I saw from him was real.
Yeah.
It was not just something that was in my head that he was threatening. And I think that was the point where I realized, like, there was something in my head that was telling me to be careful, to not rock the boat too much. And I was right. And so everything that I had shamed myself for being so stupid and so weak-willed and so just going with it was all of a sudden validated for me.
Yeah.
When he was in jail, awaiting trial, he would call my parents almost 2 or 3 times a week, trying to get them to help him out, bail him out, get him a lawyer or something. I have no idea. No one ever answered the phone. There was one time where, because it's a collect call, that he kind of like spoke over the recording almost, and was just begging my dad to help him.
Yeah.
But that was the last we ever heard of him. He was released from prison last year and was deported, not to Spain, where he was telling everyone that he was from. He was from Venezuela. Mm-hmm. So he had this complex that made him tell everyone that he was from Spain, and even that wasn't true about him.
But is he in prison in Venezuela?
No, he is. He's free.
Does that worry you?
He's tried to contact my dad on Facebook. He sent him a friend request. I hope he would never make it back here.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's something I just don't think about.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad. Thank you for sharing.
It's a long story.
It's a long story. Before, I'm going to ask you a hard question.
Mm-hmm.
Where or what have you found is a gift in all that? So I believe that everything that happens in our life happens for us, not to us. Everything. Even the really shitty things. And I believe that there's a gift in everything. And I'm just curious if you've thought about that, or if you feel like there is any sort of gift in that.
There were a lot of things that he told me I would never do because he wouldn't allow it. You know, when someone's telling you, you'll never, I will never allow you to dress a certain way. I'll never allow you to basically live out any kind of goal or dream that you have, because they don't see you as a person. They see you as a belonging, a property. Never being allowed to get a tattoo, which might have been where things started. No, not really. But it took me a long time to get past a lot of the trauma and there's still parts of me that avoid conflict and avoid hard conversations because I'm physically sick to have them, because I don't feel safe. And I've realized, like, those conversations and, like, in the everyday world, your life isn't threatened when you have a hard conversation with someone. And it's taken me a long time to realize that. But I think the biggest gift I have found is just to say, fuck what everyone else wants of you and what everyone else thinks of you. And if you have the gift every day to do and be your own person, you damn well better take it.
Yeah.
Because not only do we have that gift, here today, like, there are so many people, there are so many women, especially who are out there, who are oppressed and who are not allowed to express themselves in any way, that if we're able to do that, that we need to take that to our fullest advantage and just step into who we are 100% of the time and be 100% authentic all the time.
Yeah. That's a pretty big gift.
Yeah.
I definitely see that in you. I have known this about you as we've gotten to know each other, and you are such a strong woman, and such an incredible woman who's somehow turned this into a gift and into something that happened for you and not to you.
It took a long time.
Yeah. And there's even more to you that we haven't even gotten to. We'll probably make you a repeat guest a few times.
A few times. No, I don't know. I finally feel like, and it's been something I've had to chip away at over time. Not every iteration of myself has always been the fullest part of me. You know, after that relationship and stuff, after everything ended, I went through a huge period of heavy binge drinking. And, you know, my grades were, I had a 0.01, I think, at SUU, my first semester.
Yeah.
And, you know, I checked out. I absolutely checked out for a good 6 months, until I decided that I wanted to live a little bit more for myself. And that was at that point that I decided I was going to go live in LA. Moved to LA, did my own thing out there, went to an acting conservatory, graduated, you know, and that was my first step of kind of picking those pieces back up again. Mm-hmm. And it's been slow. It's been a long time.
You know what I want to do with this? I want to make this a 2-parter.
Okay.
Because I think we spent this whole hour leading up to this trauma that you went through, and it's not enough to just say, yeah, you've grown from this. Mm-hmm. Because I think there's even more meat in how you've grown and the experiences you had to grow past this. So I definitely we're going to do that.
Yeah, I think so.
Thanks for sharing today.
Yeah, I love it.
Stay tuned for part 2, people. Thank you so much for listening to The Naked Patient Beyond the Operating Room. I'm Dr. Nicholas Howland. Please remember that every patient who appears on this podcast has consented to discuss their story and their surgery on the podcast. That way we remain HIPAA compliant. This is a free podcast. The best thing that you can do for us is to leave us a review online. Let us know what you liked. Let us know what you'd like to hear. Let us know how we can improve. If you are curious about anything related to plastic surgery, you can reach out to me on Instagram at Dr. Nicholas Howland, and I typically respond there, or you can reach us at the office at 801-571-2020, or we have an online form you can fill out at the website, www.howlandplasticsurgery.com. Any of our coordinators would be happy to help you. Thanks again for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Naked Patient Podcast. Stay tuned for the next episode. Till next time.